Why are people in their 20s miserable nowadays? Story 1. I think at some point surely enjoying your 20s, traveling and partying, being single and having lots of relations with others, and not having to take things seriously was a thing. Now there is a mental health crisis. We all have to work very hard if not to afford immediate necessities, then to secure a future for ourselves where we won't struggle financially. I increasingly feel that 20s aren't about anything in particular. Neither are teens and 30s onward, aside from just being okay. I think now we are all just trying to be okay as opposed to great, etc. If you're consistently okay these days, mentally, emotionally, financially, socially, you're doing very well. Story 2. Because they can't afford anything. The job market is bleak. Starting salaries are low if you're lucky enough to get a job. Home prices soared, and the idea you'll ever get to own your own place is out the window. There's also a strong trend in the USA to do things individually. Think Apple Fitness versus workout classes at a gym where you can organically meet people, but one costs $10 per month and the other is $40 per month. The expansion of dating apps has made hookup culture more prevalent than ever, which makes it harder to have emotional connection. Story 3. Maybe because they've had a couple years taken out their 20s from COVID, the economy in the majority of countries is crumbling. There is constant news about wars and fear-mongering of World War III. People are struggling to afford anything. Anything anyone does is filmed and posted for millions to see. Everyone is under societal pressure by social media. Houses are now out of reach for many, constantly being grilled by older generations for not working hard enough. Dating apps, where majority look for a quick hookup, not a true relationship. There isn't much to look forward to for our futures anymore. I could carry on, but I won't. Even my granddad, who is fairly clued up about the world and has lived through a fair few decades, says this is one of the worst times to be young. All this is caused by greed, and history is always repeating itself. Story 4. I'm in my late 30s, and I can say that I hated my 20s. I was miserable, lonely, seemed destined to be upper working class, not in poverty, and enough money to afford to take a sick day, but never enough to retire. I struggled to find friends and relationships as I was only a couple years into my working life when the global financial crisis hit. Things didn't start coming together until about 30, when I started finding stability, a permanent job and decent enough pay where I could afford to buy my first home. It was only in my late 20s where I also found hobbies that I enjoyed that also helped me join new social circles. In all honesty, your 20s are the primary school of adulthood where you're just trying to find out where you fit in. Story 5. Because they spent their youth being told how easy they've got it, and now they've got it harder than ever. I'm sure some boomers will argue it was the same for them. It wasn't. Young people today have so many things to get them down. Global instability, national instability, social instability, crazy house prices, poorly paid, unfulfilling work. The list goes on and on. And on top of all that, you can't afford to do the things people usually do to distract them from the struggles in life, as they're all banned/closed down/crazy expensive. It's a shit show, basically, and there's no sign of any improvement anytime soon, so there's nothing to look forward to. Story 6. I think in the 90s we were broke, but even if you were on welfare, you could afford an apartment and food. So most of us had our own places by the time we were 20. This gave us freedom to do what we wanted before we had much in the way of responsibilities. Now the kids have good jobs that don't pay enough for them to move out of their parents' houses. Seriously limits their freedom. I think also back then parents weren't as nice. It wasn't particularly unusual to get yelled at or hit by your parents, so getting out of the house was glorious in comparison, even though it came with more responsibilities. Personally, I still prefer being an adult over being a kid. I can buy all the toys I want and can stay up as late as I want. It's 10 p.m. Who knew my parents were right about that? Story 7. Personally, I can't enjoy it much. I enjoyed being 20 until the pandemic hit, and that was about it. Honestly, how are you supposed to really enjoy your 20s when we lost years of our lives? And now everything is so expensive, we have no reasonable hope of ever owning a home. Going out anywhere costs money. If you want even a decent sandwich or burger, it'll be over $20 some places after tax, and sometimes before tax. Everyone is very anxious. We don't really expect to get much out of a job, if we can get well-paying jobs at all. Many places don't even hire full-time anymore, so they can get around costs, for example. And looking at the present and the future is stressful. Summers are now so hot that we have massive forest fires. And talking about the future can't take place without consideration of climate change impacting things. I mean, what is there to actually look forward to? I hope I'll be able to afford rent after I finish university. I don't plan to have kids or own a home. I try to set realistic expectations now, And those are to have an apartment, get a long-term job, and ideally be able to travel every few years with my partner, even if it's locally. It seems like things are getting progressively worse in many areas. I recognize it's arguably the best time in history, but there are different challenges, and they're still meaningful. I'm watching a decline in opinions on women's rights and on LGBTQ rights, and an increase in extreme views. I'm religious, and it's unbearable how terrible people are to each other. I'm exhausted every time I go online now. There are some horrible people out there, and I'm scared for the future. Story 8. I see some people went straight with the economy and whatnot, but I disagree with that. My great-grandparents grew up in the middle of 2 world wars. Do you think you had a worse childhood than they did? The reason, in my opinion, is that nowadays, people are obsessed with social media and the current news or trends that are happening. Children concern themselves with issues that are not only blown out of proportion in most cases, but issues that have been happening since the beginning of time. Yes, the economy was hit badly because of COVID, but COVID is not the first pandemic, nor do we experience the first economic struggle, nor the first World War threat, nor the first threat that the world is going to come to an end. All young people need is a little bit of a different perspective. Stop watching the news. Stop concerning yourself with the environment. You can't save it! There are corporations that pollute this planet way more than your vehicle or your plastic straw, and worrying about that ain't gonna help, nor feeling guilty. You need to find a purpose for your life, and set a goal towards what you can work and use the rest of the time to enjoy life, because life is truly a miracle. You've been given one chance at it. You don't need a lot of money to have fun, I know, because that was my childhood. You need to invest in finding good people as friends and spending more time outside instead of in front of a screen. Trust me, the moment you start going in nature and doing activities, you will see improvement in your mental health, and you will be more confident, more at peace with yourself. You will have more experiences to share with other people and more people in general in your life. There are many hiking groups for specific sports or activities that you can do outside. Use youth and strength now because you're getting older every day, and your body will not be the same 20 years from now. Story 9. Because everything is grim? There are like 1,000 applicants for every job posted. Used car prices are through the roof. Car insurance premiums for a 30-something are ridiculous. I can imagine what a 20-year-old would be. Interest rates are through the roof, so mortgage rates are crazy. That's if you can get enough for a deposit. If not, you will be stuck in the rental loop, which is difficult to get out of. Let's not forget COVID lockdown. That took a lot of important years away from them. I was Mr. Antisocial, but still went to pubs and clubs when I was 18. I think they are just in survival mode. Story 10. What is there to look forward to for 20-year-olds anymore? The boomers fucked the housing market. You need a full-time job just to qualify for health benefits, and then you still are screwed on deductibles. A used car with over 100,000 miles is now 15 to 20K depending on the model. And God forbid it's a beater. You're gonna pay out the ass for repairs. A lot of mid and late 20s kids went to college to find the market is completely oversaturated with educated people competing for jobs that hardly pay enough to make a dent in the student loans. We are potentially on the precipice of maybe one of the most devastating wars ever. It costs a minimum 5 to 7K to have a baby in a hospital. And since both parents usually have to work just to pay bills and put food on the table, childcare becomes an expense, maybe higher than a new car payment, along with all the things you need to raise the baby. So the better question is, why the fuck would anyone in their 20s right now be happy? It's hell out there. The American dream has been squandered. Story 11. I'm 35, so my 20s weren't that long ago. When I was 25 in 2014, I lived in an outer suburb of Minneapolis, St. Paul. I had a job that paid $55K in an apartment that was $650 per month with utilities. I had enough money for rent, a $340 car payment, 2013 car with 20,000 miles, student loans, and I went out drinking every weekend with my friends. I had enough money left over every month that just turned into savings. Like I wasn't actively trying to save up. I already had funds going into a Roth IRA and 401k, and I still had money left over. Like I went on spontaneous trips, bought a motorcycle, went to Mardi Gras. I had enough money saved up that I was able to go 4 months without working after I was fired. Got a job eventually, but I wasn't sweating it. Even with the new job, I was financially secure enough to quit that job and move to Atlanta for grad school, and still keep my car. From 2009 to 2019, my 20s were loads of fun. Got my degrees, but still had a blast. It's a different game for 2020. I can't afford the same lifestyle I had in my 20s now, and I make twice as much. The buying power of the dollar has gone down 47% since I turned 20, which means 20-something-year-olds today would have to make over 100K to have the same lifestyle I did in my 20s. Story 12. Because the cost of everything is through the roof. The minimum qualifications are a college degree. Otherwise, you're better off in a trade. When we were kids, if you knew how to type without looking at a keyboard and knew your way around a Windows system, you were a shoo-in for something IT related. Competition is getting fierce, and kids are glued to their phones, looking at what Instagram famous people have and comparing themselves to them, putting extreme pressure to be the best in school, to get that job, to make that money, to live that lifestyle. When they feel like they've fallen short of the mark, they don't even have the childhood memories to fall back on to put it all in perspective. Life is not for living for them. It's all trying to keep up and faking it till you make it. At some point, the lack of actually organically growing up comes home to roost. The young people are not stupid. They are incredibly intelligent. But there's a bit of, why don't you try it and find out missing, because everything is searchable and can be YouTube how-to. Story 13. While plenty of people I knew had fun in their 20s as a tail-end Gen Xer, I don't think we had the idea of your 20s are for fun. It's something I heard boomers say, but when the boomers themselves were in their 20s, they were dealing with Vietnam. In short, your 20s are for fun is something people who landed on their feet and have grown up say looking back in retrospect. In practice, for most people, your 20s are for desperately trying to transition from first jobs in school to some sort of stable career trajectory, which might be corporate or might be about building out a skill set and experience. For most people, it's also a somewhat volatile period in their personal lives, as they've grown out from under mommy and daddy, but haven't established a stable family of their own. There's actually a lot of fun times for many people in their 20s, but it's against an uncertain and somewhat stressful backdrop. It's easy for old people to hand-wave all that away if everything turned out all right for them. And just remember the high points, which are often pretty high in your 20s. That's the long-term element. Stacked on top of that are a few more things. The economy is not on fire right now. As a Canadian, our economy is growing, in real inflation-adjusted terms, but not as fast as population, which means our economy per person is actually shrinking. Housing affordability has flared into a massive issue in a lot of places, and this is dampening 20-somethings' view of the future. Realistically, boomers often had first places that were worse than what young people live in now, but they viewed that as transitory. Everyone's mental state is worse, and young people's more so, since the advent of social media. COVID had a knock on socialization and how young people especially interact in a way that I think is damaging for those without strong in-person networks. Story 14. Because you're supposed to be able to buy a house, start a family, and have a career by 30. And when you can't, older generations don't understand and shame you for it. Well, when the minimum wage is the same as when they bought a house, and that same house is double that price now, what do you expect? People are forced to stay in relationships and situations because of financial reliance. My mom even said, when I was in the first few years of life, her rent for a 3-bed, 1-bath house was about $300. She was making $10 per hour. I live in a 1-bed, 400 square feet tiny trailer, and we pay $830 a month. At the time she told me this, my husband and I both were making that much. We're looking to move into some apartments that are 2-bed, 1-bath, 800 square feet for about the same, but still, we pay so much per month that we can't save anything to move, unfortunately. Or something happens with the car, and we have to start over. We don't have credit cards or anything like that, and we own our car outright, but it's still hard. I refuse to dig myself in a further hole by adding a credit card payment that I know I can't afford. We can barely afford to eat, yet because it's more cost-efficient to eat quick meals that are usually unhealthy. I'm overweight. I just had a baby and can't seem to afford to buy fresh produce every week or multiple times a week. Quantity over quality when it comes to price. You focus on just having enough to last till payday rather than on the actual meal or food. It feels like you have no control over your life. I ended up homeless in 2020 due to losing my job because of COVID. Unemployment didn't go through because the offices were shut down and so many people were calling. The wait times were like 8 hours long. Ever since then, it has just been trying to get to a livable point. Long, but I know I'm probably not the only one. Story 15. The idea that your 20s are supposed to be the prime of your life is a myth. It's generally a time when you're on the bottom of the totem pole. In a professional sense, you get the least respect and reward for the most menial tasks. Interpersonally, at 25, you're really just starting to think like an adult and engage in interpersonal relationships on an adult level. In contemporary times, the economy is fucked for anyone who was not already set up before the pandemic. And there is no clear path to things like home ownership and financial security for a large portion, perhaps even the majority, of the working population under 40. Story 16. I personally think it has a lot to do with high expectations. coming from yourself or what others expect from you. It's just that age where you are still deciding what career path you want in life, whether you are still in school or just working. It's a lot of pressure. You may very well feel that your friends, coworkers, cousins, etc. are ahead or doing better than you. Then in your mid-20s, it really starts hitting you. The whole aspect of getting married, your family has more expectations from you. At this point, they want you to have your career or perhaps even get settled. Even in today's economy, everything is super expensive, and that just creates a bigger burden on you when you are simply in the phase of figuring out your life. Story 17. I'm in my 50s now and have 2 kids in their mid-20s. My parents and I myself have never lived through an economic era like this. Starter jobs are not enough to afford independent housing, much less things like food, utilities, transportation, and healthcare. They both have school debt they have to pay off, and things do not look like they're going to get better anytime soon. To compare, when I was in my 20s back in the early 90s, I had a job making $8.50 an hour. My girlfriend had something similar. I was able to rent a 1,500 square feet house in a decent neighborhood with my girlfriend, buy a 3-year-old used car for transportation, buy groceries, and eat out 3 times a week. I had great health insurance and 5 sick days a year. Had a week paid vacation where we actually went on trips. Were able to easily afford utilities, cable TV, and even had money for frivolous shopping. That world no longer exists. Starter jobs are $7.25 to $14 an hour. Rent is well over $1,300 a month in bad areas. Utilities will set you back $200 a month if you're very frugal. High deductible health insurance is $400 to $600 a month. Beater used cars are over $10,000, and as mentioned, many people leaving school have $200 a month or more in tuition payments. This is not sustainable. We're fortunate enough to have a large house, and we're keeping our kids at home until they can establish themselves. We want them to focus on finding their place in life rather than simply surviving. Most others don't have that luxury. To solve this, everyone needs to vote on issues that will fix society for the long term. Support any and all legislation to enact universal health care. The United States is the richest country in the world, yet we're the only first world nation without health coverage for its citizens. Support public colleges. Elementary and high school educations are provided by the government. College is essential for career-level jobs in today's world. And the fact you have to pay thousands of dollars to obtain a degree without having a job to pay for it means you're enslaving yourself to the system before your foot is even out of the gate. Again, the United States is one of the only first world countries that doesn't have free college. Seeing a pattern here? Stop corporations from buying up affordable housing to create rent monopolies. Wondering why apartments and houses are so expensive? Groups are buying every starter home, apartment complex, and condo they can grab and then fixing prices for entire regions. Laws need to be put in place to fix this, or we're going to end up with a new generation of homelessness. Story 18. Shit economy that's beginning to mirror the rates of the Great Depression, rising healthcare costs, which make people more health conscious in general. The pandemic had a part to play. As for the family part, surprised no one pointed out the large disparity in political opinion between the genders. Men have begun to lean more conservative while women have begun to lean more progressive. As we know, the difference in ideologies can cause a lot of mismatch in the expectations of a relationship, which can be why many people are struggling to get married and stay married. Story 19. I'm 27. My housemate, who is 42, was telling me about life before 9/11 and how it was odd in America, but affected the entire West. He showed me the news the day before 9/11, and it was so lighthearted and fun. Then I realized how this generation has had nothing but bad news and life has got more bleak, and there has been nothing for us. We grew up in the recession and hoped when we grow up it will be fixed. But no, we haven't had a chance to get on our feet because it's blow after blow of wars, economic problems, bad government, budget cuts, stupid laws, changing workforce, but the same education, overpopulation, stagnant wages. I could go on all day. We should be true adults by now with houses and kids, and we should be looking forward to the future. But we're filled with dread at what's next and have given up hope of a good life. Story 20. Wouldn't say I'm miserable, but I'm definitely not thriving how I would like to. While I'm not content with my job career field, I am working towards something better for myself. My friends are in the same boat. We talk, but there isn't anything to do other than get hammered at a local bar or drive out to the city and spend hundreds of dollars on a night out, which most of us don't want to do. We do it for the sake of going out. The only things left to do in my area are meant for children and teens. I'm not saying we can't go there, but it's obvious nobody wants us there. Try to go laser tagging, and you get weird looks from all the moms like we should be doing something else with our time IDK. Another thing that sits in the back of my mind is that we've been on the brink of a major war for like 2 decades now, at least as an American. And I'm in the perfect age range, where if it got really bad, I'm sure I'd get a letter in the mail. Nobody is joining the military. Numbers are down. So yeah, if a world war breaks out, bet your ass they'll reenact the draft. There's also trying to feed myself, but also knowing most of it is filled with poison. But I can't afford the good stuff, so I accepted the fact I'll probably die of ass cancer unless we get nuked or some shit. I understand it could be worse, but it surely doesn't seem like it's getting better.